She replaced her sister as a nanny for one day, unaware the single dad was a millionaire who'd been watching her all along. On a cold winter morning in the quiet suburbs of Seattle, Katie Lane stood at the front door of a stately estate. Her heart pounded nervously beneath her beige coat. Snow dusted the hedges along the walkway, and her breath curled in small white clouds as she tucked a stray strand of golden hair behind her ear. She had never been to a neighborhood like this, much less a mansion of this scale. This place was a world away from her familiar life of story times and finger painting. But her sister had called in a sheer panic. She had a high fever, no backup nanny, and Katie, still grieving her own mother's recent death, said yes without a second thought. The heavy door opened with a soft, expensive click. A man stood there, tall and broad-shouldered. He wore a dark sweater over a crisp collared shirt, his face sharp and unreadable. His eyes, a cold, intense gray, locked onto hers with unsettling intensity. Before Katie could find her voice, a little girl peeked out from behind the man's leg. Her wide hazel eyes lit up with recognition. She gasped, "You look like Miss Sunshine." Katie blinked, startled by the name. I'm sorry?" The man's brow furrowed in confusion, but the little girl beamed up at her. "I remember you," the child continued, stepping forward now, her small arms swinging with excitement. "You're Miss Sunshine." "You sang the Brave song." Katie smiled, still a bit lost but charmed by the girl's certainty. She crouched down to the girl's level. "Hi there, sweetie. I'm Katie. I'm just here for today. Your usual nanny is a bit under the weather." The girl clapped her hands once, delighted. "But you came anyway. Daddy, can she stay?" Katie looked up at the man just as he finally spoke. "Ava, let's go inside," he said, his voice deep and measured. Katie rose to her feet, searching his expression for any hint of a welcome. There was none, only a brief formal nod as he stepped aside, holding the door open for her. "Thank you," Katie said softly, stepping into the entryway. The space was grand, with vaulted ceilings, polished hardwood floors, and an air that suggested silence was preferred over conversation. Ava skipped ahead, humming something softly under her breath. Katie turned slightly toward the man. "So I suppose you're Mr. Carter?" He nodded again, this time a bit slower. "Alex Carter." He didn't offer a handshake. Katie tried a warm smile anyway. "It's nice to meet you. I promise I won't cause any trouble. I'll just keep Ava company, make her lunch, and be out of your hair before dinner." Alex's gaze hadn't left her face since she walked in. It wasn't a predatory stare, but rather as if he were trying to match her to a memory he couldn't quite place. His eyes flicked over her golden hair, her soft features, and her slightly nervous stance. He had seen her before, not here, not like this, but in a different light, a different moment. "Miss Sunshine," Ava whispered again as she disappeared into the living room, her voice carrying like a ghost through the hall. Alex remained silent, but inside his pulse quickened. It couldn't be. Not after all this time. Not her. Not the woman he'd seen in that old preschool video. The one who had sung to his daughter when she was lost in grief after her mother's passing. He remembered the way that woman's voice had filled the auditorium, soft and steady. He remembered how his daughter had stopped crying for the first time in weeks. He remembered how someone, some teacher or assistant, had crouched beside Ava and whispered something only she could hear. Later in the parents' group chat, someone had posted a shaky video. It was just a snippet of a warm voice, a blonde woman singing and rocking Ava gently. There was no name, no way to know who she was. He had kept that video, playing it on nights that felt too long and too quiet. And now she was standing in his foyer holding a bag filled with children's books and puzzles. Katie Lane. She had no idea. And he wasn't sure what to do with that information. "I'll be in my office," Alex finally said, stepping past her. "Ava knows her routines." Katie nodded. "Of course. Thank you again." He paused at the stairs and glanced back once more. She was taking off her coat, placing it neatly on the hook, humming something to herself. It was the same tune. The very same tune from the video. His jaw tensed. Then he turned and walked away, the click of his shoes echoing down the long hallway. Katie exhaled slowly, her breath finally steadying. She was only here for one day, just one. But something already told her this day wasn't going to be ordinary at all. Under the soft hum of his office lights, Alex Carter sat behind his massive mahogany desk. The walls around him were lined with books he rarely read anymore. His computer screen glowed with unread emails, but his eyes weren't on them. They were fixed on a small silver flash drive sitting beside his keyboard. He reached for it slowly, almost reverently, and plugged it into the port with a decisive click. A window opened. There was one video file labeled simply Be Brave Day. He clicked it. The screen flickered to life. And there it was. 2 years ago, a preschool auditorium was filled with construction paper stars, hand-drawn posters, and the shy voices of children. The camera, held by an unsteady parent, scanned the room before focusing on a tiny girl sitting all alone on a bench. It was Ava, just 4 years old then, her dark curls tucked behind her ears, her small hands clenched tightly in her lap. She looked utterly lost. Then, another figure entered the frame. It was Katie. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a loose ponytail, her posture gentle but confident. She knelt beside Ava and whispered something that the camera's microphone could not catch. Ava looked up at her, and after a moment she nodded. Katie then turned to the room and, in a clear, soothing voice, began to sing. It wasn't a flashy performance. There was no background music, no roaring applause, just a simple melody. Her voice was soft and unwavering as she sang a lullaby about bravery, about remembering, and about a love that doesn't disappear. And then she said the words that had echoed in Alex's mind ever since. "Even when someone we love is gone, they live right here," she said, tapping her chest gently. "Every time we smile." In the video, Ava leaned her head against Katie's shoulder, no longer crying. Alex paused the video. For months after Ava's mother had died, nothing had reached his daughter. No therapy, no new toys, no bedtime stories could break through her sadness. But that day, something had changed. Ava had come home with a faint smile on her face and a folded letter tucked into her backpack. It was a small note written in child-friendly cursive on pink paper, with a sun drawn in the corner. "Dear Ava, I see how strong your heart is, even when it feels like it's breaking. Your mommy loves you from the stars. Every time you are kind or brave, you shine just like her. With hugs, Miss Sunshine." There had been no last name, no title, and no explanation. Alex had asked the school about her. They told him she was a temporary teaching intern, a Katie something. She had only been there for a few weeks as part of a college support program. They didn't have her contact information. She had moved on. That was all they could tell him. But the letter remained in a drawer by Ava's bed. The video stayed on his desk. And now, 2 years later, the woman who had helped his daughter start to feel again was in his living room, pouring juice and arranging puzzle pieces. He exhaled slowly, rubbing a hand over his tired face. He had recognized her immediately. She had the same hair, the same warmth in her eyes. Ava's words that morning hadn't been a coincidence. She had known. Children don't forget the ones who hold them when they are breaking. Alex replayed the video one more time, watching Katie smile, watching Ava lean into her embrace. She had no idea who he was, no idea of the profound impact she had already made on his family. And now, fate had brought her back to his doorstep without any invitation at all. He thought of going to her, of saying, "You changed everything for my daughter." But something inside him hesitated. He wanted to know something first, something he wasn't sure how to ask. If she could reach his daughter in the darkness, could she possibly do the same for him? It wouldn't be because of a memory. It wouldn't be because of a letter. It would be because of the person she was, right here, right now. He closed the video. From the living room, the soft sound of Katie's laughter drifted through the halls, low, real, and undeniably healing. The morning sun had risen higher, casting golden light through the vast windows of the Carter estate. But inside, the atmosphere remained hushed, as if the home had long forgotten how to echo with joy. Katie moved gently through the grand space, taking in the details that seemed almost too perfect. There was the pristine white furniture, the framed modern art, the complete absence of clutter or warmth. It was a beautiful house, but it didn't feel like a home. Yet the moment she stepped into the playroom, everything changed. Ava was already there, sitting cross-legged on a rug that looked like a cloud, a stuffed bunny tucked securely under one arm. She looked up, her big eyes curious but not afraid. Katie knelt slowly, bringing herself to the child's level. "Hi again," she said with a warm smile, her voice as soft as falling snow. "Do you want to build something today, or maybe we can make up a story?" Ava hesitated for a moment, then nodded shyly. Katie's heart lifted. She glanced around, saw a small basket of picture books, and an idea bloomed. She gathered a few, then sat down on the rug beside Ava. "What if we make a story that no one has ever heard before? One that belongs just to you and me?" Ava's eyes lit up. Let's see, Katy mused, tapping her chin playfully. Once upon a time, in a kingdom hidden between the clouds and the stars, there lived a tiny brave princess named Lila. Lila, Ava repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, and Princess Lila had the most beautiful mommy in the whole world, Katy continued. Her mommy's name was Claire. Ava's breath caught in her throat. That was her mother's name. Katy couldn't have known. She had no idea. But Ava nodded slowly at first, then again, faster this time. She had long hair like sunlight, Katy went on, her voice full of wonder. And she used to sing to Princess Lila when the stars came out. One day, her mommy had to go on a long journey, but she left something special behind. Do you want to guess what it was? Ava leaned closer, her eyes wide with anticipation. What? Her laugh, Katy whispered conspiratorially. She hid it in the wind. And every time the wind tickled the princess's cheeks, she knew her mommy was saying hello. For a beat, the room was completely silent. Then Ava giggled. It was a sound so full, so sudden, so innocent that it startled even Katy. Ava laughed again, clutching her bunny, her tiny shoulders shaking with pure delight. Down the hall, Alex stood just out of view, listening. The sound of that laugh hit him like a thunderclap. It had been so long, months, maybe even longer, since he had heard his daughter laugh like that. It wasn't a polite chuckle or a forced reaction, but a real, genuine laugh, one that bubbled up from her belly and lit up her entire face. He leaned against the wall for support, his hand tightening over his chest. Who was this woman? Katy sat with Ava for hours. They built magnificent castles from pillows, created entire kingdoms with crayons, and danced to old music Katy found on the family's Bluetooth speaker. She gave Ava silly voices for her dolls, braided her dark curls, and listened. She really listened when Ava spoke in half-formed sentences about the stars, about her bunny, about her mom. By late afternoon, the house felt different. It seemed to breathe again. Ava ran through the halls, her bunny flying through the air, her feet light on the hardwood floors. And Katy, despite being exhausted, felt fuller and more alive than she had in weeks. As the sun dipped low and painted the sky with brilliant orange streaks, Katy helped Ava into her pajamas and read one last story by her bedside. The little girl's eyes fluttered sleepily. Alex appeared at the door then, quiet as ever. Katy stood up, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. Well, she said softly, I guess I'll be heading out. I hope she sleeps well. But before she could turn to leave, Ava sat up and reached for her. Can you come again tomorrow? The little girl asked, wrapping her arms tightly around Katy's waist. Katy hesitated, surprised by the strength of the hug and the plea in the girl's voice. Her throat tightened. She started, then looked over at Alex. He met her gaze. But it wasn't the cold, assessing look he had given her that morning. It wasn't guarded or merely curious. It was something else entirely, something deeper. He nodded slowly as if granting permission or perhaps making a silent plea of his own. And in that one moment, Katy felt it. It was the kind of silence that spoke louder than words. It was the unspoken realization that today, something had shifted. Something important had changed. And maybe, just maybe, this was only the beginning. Alex stood in the doorway, watching as Katy crouched beside Ava, helping the little girl press cookie cutters into rolled-out dough. Laughter drifted from the kitchen like sunlight through a half-open window. He had not heard that beautiful sound in his house for a long time, not since before. When Katy first arrived, it was only supposed to be for one day. But when his assistant mentioned that Katy's sister was still sick, Alex had made a decision that night. After putting Ava to bed, he approached her. I'd like to hire you, he said simply. Katy blinked, surprised. Just until my sister recovers. Alex nodded. A temporary nanny just for a few days. Of course, we'll compensate you fairly. She hesitated for a moment. I'm not sure. I'm actually a kindergarten teacher. I'm just on leave right now because, well, my mother passed away recently. His expression softened instantly. I'm very sorry for your loss. She gave him a small, sad smile. Thank you. There's no pressure, he added quickly. But Ava, she really likes you. That was the undeniable truth. In just 24 hours, Ava had clung to Katy like a lifeline. Katy had read her stories in silly voices, helped her find constellations from her bedroom window at night, and even gotten her to laugh out loud, a sound Alex hadn't heard in months. So Katy stayed. What was originally one day became 3, then 5. With each morning, the house seemed a little warmer, a little brighter. Katie made pancakes in the shape of stars. She taught Ava how to write thank you notes and built paper boats for her bath. In the evenings, she'd hum while folding laundry or sit on the floor drawing pictures with Ava. The house no longer felt like a monument to grief. It felt alive. Alex found himself looking forward to the mornings again. He looked forward to the way Katie smiled when she handed him his coffee. He loved watching how she gently corrected Ava's spelling without ever making her feel small. She wasn't just filling a gap. She was fundamentally changing something within their home. One night, after Ava had fallen asleep, Katie stayed behind in the little reading nook off the hall. She was watching the child breathe slowly, a storybook still resting in her lap. Alex approached quietly, holding a folded piece of paper in his hand. "Katie." She turned, whispering, "She's finally asleep." He nodded, then held out the paper. "I wanted to ask you something." She took the letter. It was worn, folded, and unfolded 100 times over. Her eyes scanned the familiar handwriting and her breath caught. "This?" she began softly. "This is—" "Was this yours?" he asked, his voice gentle. Katie nodded slowly. 2 years ago. I was just a teaching intern then. Ava was sitting alone during nap time, crying. I didn't know her name. No one told me, but I just couldn't leave her like that. So I wrote this and slipped it into her backpack. She traced the words with her fingers. You're brave. And even when someone we love is gone, they stay in our hearts forever. Every time we smile, every time we remember. Love doesn't disappear. It just changes shape. Katie looked up, her eyes misty. I never thought anyone would keep it. Alex's voice was quiet, full of emotion. It kept us. There was a long, meaningful silence between them. I didn't even sign my real name, she said. I just wrote Miss Sunshine. That's what the kids used to call me. I know, he replied softly. I watched a video another parent posted from that day. You were helping Ava talk about her mom. I've watched that clip more times than I can count. Katie's eyes filled with tears. I never knew. You changed her, Alex said, his voice thick with unshed emotion. You changed me. Katie folded the letter carefully and held it close to her chest. It was just a letter, Alex shook his head. No, it was the beginning of everything. She smiled through her tears, the kind of tears that come from being seen, truly seen, for something you never expected to matter. That night, as Katie stood under the soft hallway light, holding the letter she once wrote to a grieving child she didn't even know, Alex looked at her not as a guest or a nanny, but as the woman who had unknowingly walked into his life years ago and was now standing in his home, changing it all over again. The days began to blend into each other in the most comforting way. Mornings started with the soft sound of Ava's feet padding into the kitchen and Katie humming as she flipped pancakes. Afternoons were filled with books, laughter, and quiet learning moments on the sun-drenched porch. Evenings were slower, gentler, as the sky turned indigo and Katie read to Ava, both of them nestled into the corner of the big couch. Alex watched it all from the edges, quietly taking it all in. Katie had a way of folding herself into their lives without ever demanding space. She just belonged without even trying. It was in the way she looked at Ava when she laughed. It was in the way she instinctively set a second cup of coffee beside him, just how he liked it. No cream, 2 sugars. It was in the way she filled the silence with peace, not noise. There were moments, brief but undeniable, when their eyes would meet across the room and something unspoken would hang in the air. It wasn't quite love, not yet, but it was something tender, something real. One Thursday evening, as a winter wind tapped against the windows, Ava developed a fever. It started with flushed cheeks and quiet whimpers, then progressed to chills and a glassy-eyed stare. Katie noticed it first. She pressed her palm gently to the child's forehead, concern clouding her beautiful face. I think she's burning up, Katie whispered, scooping Ava into her arms without a moment's hesitation. I'll stay with her tonight. Alex stood at the door, feeling unsure and deeply worried. Are you sure? You don't have to. I want to, Katie interrupted softly. She needs someone close. For the next 8 hours, Katie never left Ava's side. She kept a damp cloth on her forehead, read softly to her between naps, and sat awake through the deep stillness of the night, listening to the slow, steady rhythm of Ava's breathing. She didn't sleep. She didn't complain. She simply stayed. At 3:15 a.m., as Katie leaned against the headboard with Ava's head resting on her lap, she noticed a small tray had been left by the door. A mug of warm ginger tea sat there next to a folded note. She picked it up, her eyes already wet before she even unfolded the paper. "You stayed for her." "Thank you." There was no signature, but none was needed. She held the note to her chest and closed her eyes, 1,000 emotions flooding through her. The next morning, Ava's fever had broken. Her little voice returned, hoarse but cheerful. Katie helped her brush her hair, tied it back with a blue ribbon, and made her a soft breakfast of scrambled eggs. Alex joined them at the table, quiet and thoughtful. That afternoon, Katie sat in the backyard alone, watching the bare trees sway and feeling the strange, unfamiliar ache of something beautiful beginning. Her phone buzzed with a message. "Miss Lane, we'd love to have you back. A full-time kindergarten teaching position has opened at Lakeside Elementary. Please let us know by Monday." She stared at the screen. It was a job offer, a chance to return to the things she loved, a stable career, a new beginning for herself. So why did her stomach twist into a knot? Why did the image of Ava's sleepy eyes, Alex's quiet presence, and the sound of laughter in the kitchen make her hesitate? This house had become something more than just a temporary shelter. It felt like a family, like a home she hadn't even known she was missing. But was it real? Or was she just filling in a space that someone else had left behind? Katie walked inside slowly, the decision gnawing at her. She passed the framed letter that Alex had hung near the front hallway, the very note she had once written for a girl whose name she had not known. Now she could not imagine her days without that girl's smile. The weight of the choice pressed down on her. She could stay and risk wanting more than she was allowed to hope for, or she could leave before it hurt too much. She stood there, suspended between everything she had ever known and everything she had never expected to find. And in the quiet of that late afternoon, one truth rang perfectly clear. This was no longer just a job, and Katie's heart was no longer her own. Katie stood by the window, her fingers tracing the rim of her lukewarm tea. Outside, the snow had begun to fall again, soft and silent, blanketing the world in a clean, fresh white. The house behind her was quiet. Too quiet. She had made her decision. That morning, she sat down with Alex at the long kitchen table. Ava was still sleeping upstairs, her fever completely gone, her dreams peaceful. Katie folded her hands in her lap, her eyes fixed on the floor. "I got the offer," she said gently. "The teaching job." Alex looked at her, something unreadable flickering in his gaze. "And I'm going to take it." There was a long, heavy pause. Alex exhaled slowly, his jaw tightening. "Is it what you want?" he asked, his voice calm. Too calm. Katie nodded, though her heart thudded painfully in her chest. "It's what I was meant to do. Teaching it's where I belong." She couldn't bring herself to look at him. "I see," he said, still calm, still quiet. But the hurt sat just beneath his words like a shadow. She finally raised her eyes to meet his. This was never supposed to be permanent. I was only filling in for my sister. I was never meant to stay." Alex leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. "You were never temporary, Katie." Her breath caught in her throat. "But I know I don't get to decide that," he added, his voice softer now. Katie stood, trying to speak through the lump rising in her throat. "You and Ava, you've been incredible. This house, these days, they've meant more to me than I can ever say." He rose from his chair too, looking at her for a long moment, as if he were trying to memorize her face. "Then why are you leaving?" She blinked, her eyes brimming with tears. "Because I'm not her. I'm not Ava's mother. I'm not your wife. I was just someone passing through." "You were never just anything," he said, but the words came too late. Katie stepped back, grabbed her bag, and walked out of the kitchen before her resolve could completely crack. That evening she packed her things in silence. Her sister arrived to take over, fully recovered, and they exchanged quiet hugs. Katie smiled through the goodbyes, kissed Ava's forehead one last time, and whispered promises to write. Then she left. The snow was falling heavier now, muffling her footsteps as she walked to the gate. Her cab waited at the curb. She climbed inside, refusing to look back at the house that no longer felt like just someone else's home. Just as the driver reached for the ignition, a voice called out, "Wait!" Ava's nanny, now back, ran to the cab holding out a small brown box. "Mr. Carter wanted you to have this," she said, pressing it into Katie's hands. Katie opened it in the back seat as the cab pulled away from the curb. Inside was a single item, a delicate wooden frame. Behind the glass was the letter, the very one she had written years ago on that long-forgotten day. Her words, still simple, still childlike in their warmth, stared back at her in her own handwriting. Even when someone we love is gone, they live here every time we smile. And beneath it, a new line was inked in Alex's elegant script. To the woman who changed 2 lives with a few kind words. Katie clutched the frame to her chest, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. The snow continued to fall, the world blurring outside the window. She stared down at her own handwriting, her heart aching in places she hadn't known existed. She had left to protect herself from getting hurt. But what if leaving was the very thing that would break her? Katie walked the familiar hallway of her new classroom, her heels tapping softly against the linoleum. The children laughed. Crayons scattered across tables and tiny voices buzzed with stories and secrets. She smiled the way she always did, but it never quite reached her eyes. Each day she poured herself into the work. She led story time with grace, gently wiped away tears, and encouraged little hands to be brave and curious. But in the quiet moments during lunch breaks, or when the final bell rang and the room emptied, she felt it. The ache. The absence. It wasn't the job, she loved teaching. It was the silence where Ava's laugh should have been. It was the coffee she poured for herself in the morning without seeing Alex's tired, grateful smile from across the kitchen. It was the cold edge of a pillow that had once been warmed by a feeling of belonging, not loneliness. She missed them. She missed him. Then, one Thursday afternoon, as the sun filtered through the tall windows, her school secretary appeared in the doorway with a small package in her hand. "This came for you," she said. Katie's name was written in uneven crayon on the front. She sat at her desk, her heart pounding as she tore the brown paper with careful fingers. Inside was a handmade book. It was made of thick construction paper bound with ribbon, with glitter on the corners and stickers of stars, bears, and rainbows scattered throughout. On the first page was a drawing of Ava holding Katie's hand. Above them the words, "Me and Miss Sunshine." Katie gasped softly. Each page was a memory. There was Ava brushing cookie flour from Katie's nose. There was Ava asleep in Katie's lap with a book open between them. And there was Ava laughing in the snow while Alex stood watching, smiling, his eyes always on Katie. The final page was simple. It was a heart drawn with a red crayon and a message written in Ava's messy, unmistakable handwriting. "Come home, Miss Sunshine." Katie pressed her hand to her chest, her throat tight with emotion. She reached for her phone and dialed the number she knew by heart. 1 ring, 2 no answer. Her hand trembled as she tried again. Nothing. She stood up so quickly her chair fell backward with a crash. "I have to go," she told the secretary, grabbing her coat. "It's a family thing." "Is everything okay?" the woman called after her. Katie did not answer. Outside, the wind had picked up. The air smelled like more snow was coming. She flagged down a taxi, climbed in, and gave the driver the address she had once typed into a rideshare app, never knowing it would change her life. The ride felt impossibly long. Her fingers clutched the little book in her lap as if it might disappear. Her mind raced with questions, doubts, and a hope that refused to be extinguished. When the cab finally pulled up to the iron gates, the sky was turning a soft lavender. Lights glowed warmly in the windows. Her breath caught. She paid the driver, stepped onto the path, and walked to the front door. She hesitated, then knocked. For a moment there was only silence. Then the door opened. Warm light spilled onto the porch, and there he was. Alex stood framed by the doorway, his sweater sleeves rolled to his elbows, his expression initially unreadable. But his eyes, those gray, solemn eyes, softened the instant they saw her. "Katie," he breathed like a prayer. She did not speak. She could not. Then a small voice behind him rang out. "Miss Sunshine!" Ava darted forward, flinging herself into Katie's arms before anyone could stop her. Katie knelt, wrapping her arms tightly around the child, her tears soaking into the little girl's coat. Alex stepped closer, hesitant but hopeful. Katie looked up, her voice trembling. "I got your book," he nodded. "We made it together. Every night before bed she'd ask if you were coming back." She blinked, trying to steady her heart. "And you? Did you wonder?" Alex exhaled slowly. "Every day." She stood, with Ava still holding her hand tightly. Alex reached into his pocket and pulled out another letter. This wasn't a ring, not a grand gesture, just a piece of paper folded carefully. He handed it to her. "This time it's from me." Katie opened it, her hands shaking. "Would you stay? Not just for her, but for me, too." She looked up, her eyes brimming with happy tears, and nodded. The sky had already surrendered to nightfall when Katy stepped out of the cab. The familiar iron gates loomed before her, softened now by the amber glow from the windows beyond. The mansion stood bathed in golden light, wrapped in winter's hush, like a dream suspended in time. She walked slowly up the pathway, her breath curling in the cold air. Her fingers clutched the photo book tighter with every step. The silence of the neighborhood wrapped around her shoulders like a question. Would he still want her here? She reached the door. Before she could even raise her hand to knock, it swung open. A soft warmth poured from the entryway, carrying the scent of cinnamon and old wood. Katy blinked, startled. Inside, Alex sat on the living room floor, a book in his hand. Ava was curled up against his side, her head nestled into his chest. He had been reading to her, his voice low, steady, and comforting. When his eyes met Katy's, the words on the page died mid-sentence. He stood up slowly. "Katy," he said, his breath catching like a thread snagged on something fragile. She stepped inside, hesitating in the threshold. Ava looked up, her small face breaking into pure joy. "Miss Sunshine!" she squealed, scrambling to her feet. Katy barely had time to kneel before Ava launched herself into her arms, hugging her with all her might. "I knew you'd come back." Katy kissed the top of her head, closing her eyes and breathing in the moment. "I missed you, sweetheart. So much." When she looked up again, Alex was still watching her, still stunned, still waiting. He walked slowly toward them, a mix of emotions flickering across his face. Relief, hesitation, fear, and hope. "I thought maybe the book was too much," he murmured. "Or not enough." Katy shook her head, a tear finally escaping and tracing a path down her cheek. It was everything. He reached into his sweater pocket and pulled out another folded paper. "This one wasn't from Ava. It's from me," he explained. "I was going to give this to you if you ever came back. But I wrote it whether you did or not." He handed it to her. Katy opened it slowly, her heart pounding. "Dear Miss Sunshine," it began. "You were never just a nanny or a guest or a temporary answer to a problem. From the moment I saw how you looked at Ava, like she was the most important story you had ever read, I knew. You gave my daughter her smile back. But you also gave me something I thought I had lost forever, a reason to believe in new beginnings. So now I am writing my own. This is not a proposal. There is no ring. Not yet. Just a question. Would you stay? Not just for her, but for me too. Yours if you'll have us, Alex." Katy's hands trembled as she held the letter to her chest. She looked up at him through her tears, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes." Alex stepped forward, his eyes full of something fierce and tender. "Are you sure?" She nodded, a real radiant smile finally breaking through the tears. "I have never been more sure of anything in my life." He dropped to one knee, not with a ring, but with both of his hands held open, offering nothing but hope and a future. And Ava, still clinging to Katy's arm, looked between them and giggled. "Does this mean you're staying forever?" Katy wrapped one arm around the little girl and reached her other hand out to Alex, pulling them both close into a hug that felt like coming home. "If you'll have me." The three of them stood there in the golden, quiet light, the warmth of the home wrapping around them like a blanket. They were no longer strangers, no longer broken pieces searching for a place to fit. They were a family, born not of blood but of kindness, of letters, and of love in its simplest, most powerful form. The letter that had once been signed Miss Sunshine had led them to the only signature that mattered now. The unspoken promise between them, forever. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who still believes in second chances, handwritten letters, and the quiet power of kindness. Sometimes the smallest gesture, a note tucked into a backpack, a bedtime story, a door left slightly open, can change the entire course of a life. If you want more stories like this, tales that stir the soul, celebrate unexpected love, and remind us that family can be found in the most unlikely of ways, subscribe to Soul Stirring Stories. New heartwarming videos are waiting for you, and maybe the next one will change your day too. Subscribe now to Soul Stirring Stories and let your heart be reminded that love always finds a way.